Welcome to the Schtick. This is your host, Matthew Seth Ostrov. I have a very special guest today, a very dear friend from Los Angeles, California. Please welcome award-winning director Steven Bernstein.
Hi, Matthew. Thank you. I don't know how special I am, but you're very, very kind. Thank you.
How's your week been?
Complicated. It's good, but lots going on. My We just did the rollout of my new novel, GRQ, which we had a book launch in London at Waterstones in Trafalgar Square, a big bookstore, and that sold out, which was great. Then we had a preview screening of the film on which is based on the book, also in London about a week later, and that also sold out and was very well received. And the book sales kind of took off way beyond our expectations. So I think the publishers are doing their best to keep up, as are the distributors of the book in Canada and the US and in the UK and Ireland and everything. So it's selling. And then we got on the bestseller list in Ireland, which was a big deal. And it's been mad. So, the old joke about how do you make God laugh, you plan. So we figured this is going to be a quiet period before I start my next film, which is coming soon. In fact, I'm shooting in Winnipeg. And
Oh, you
then
are. Oh,
I am, yeah, and then another project after that. And I figured I'll have a little holiday before it all happens. And the book went crazy. So now we're trying to make sure that everybody gets a hold of the book that wants to, and everyone who sees the film that wants to. But yeah, so it's great, but it hasn't been relaxing now.
that's good. Yeah, I got it. So
There it is.
you can
Yeah,
see it. There you go.
kind of
Everybody, you can
it's
get it on Amazon. That's where I got it. And it's a wonderful read. I'm in the middle of it, following the main character's
yeah,
journey and his
yeah.
life.
I have
And
one too. Look, see, so we
look,
both have copies.
there you go. No, it was good. I'm glad. And then, so you're shooting a film in Winnipeg. That's wonderful.
Well, we're the journey of making GRQ is like the journey of any independent film. It's a wild ride. As an independent filmmaker, you got to do a lot of things. You got to obviously, if you're a writer, you write. You got a cast, which is complicated, and you have to raise the money. You then have to put a crew together. You have to shoot it. It's a lot of joy, a lot of complexity, but also a lot of turmoil. And I always thought it would be interesting to document what that journey is like. And I've done it a lot. I've been doing films for over 40 years and a long time cinematographer, shot the Oscar-winning Monster and shot White Chicks in Vancouver and shot Half Baked in Toronto and shot a lot of movies, nearly 100 now. But people do behind the scenes, which are all kind of fluff pieces. They don't really talk about the agonies and the fears and the joys and the damage and the successes that one has putting together an independent project. So I wrote a script based on all my experiences, but particularly the making of the film GRQ and the writing of the book. And it's kind of a comic, tragic journey that with not only me, but six versions of me on stage, all arguing with themselves. And then giant puppets representing my wife and my friends. And it's a wild stage production, which our intention right now, we've got some partners up there in Winnipeg, is to shoot it in Winnipeg in August. So we're excited at the prospect. Still work to do and still some techniques to work out, but that's our plan.
Yeah, we have a very as you've been here many times, I guess you've fallen in love with the city.
I like Winnipeg a lot. I've got some great friends up there. It's first of all, just on the financial side, the 65% tax incentive they have there is very attractive to filmmakers around the world. But also, what's interesting is there's a concentration of artists and filmmakers and musicians out of Winnipeg, which people wouldn't or normally think of a place from what would be the equivalent of the American Midwest, and kind of a train stop halfway across Canada to be this creative hub. But it is. And I've met some really fascinating people there. And then I'm just fascinated by everything from the architecture to Manitoba itself, northern Manitoba. I think is quite remarkable. I think it's a special place, and it's got some beautiful theaters there. And we'll be doing our work in a theater, and it's got a great soundstage there now, Big Sky, which is fantastic. And it's got Annalie Ames, who does a really interesting acting school there, which I think is valuable. Neil, an architect we know, has done some really interesting buildings there. It's just a really interesting concentration of artists and artisans and imaginative thinkers. So I think a great place to do some of my creative work.
That's wonderful. Yeah, and we're friendly, you
You're
know?
very friendly indeed, and you're honest, which is the other thing. Not that people aren't honest in Los Angeles.
Right. Exactly. A different landscape completely. So I'm going to circle in. So what inspired you to become a director?
That's always a complex question because creative expression, I think, is essential to everybody in their life. It's the reshaping or the reordering of our experience of the world is what the creative mind does. So we, wake up each day and we have kind of our version of a narrative. We go to work, we fall in love, we have children, we do whatever we do. But that's the order of our life. But of course, as Viktor Frankl so wisely guided us, we search for meaning. We want to understand why we're here, what we're doing, what ultimately will give us a more a more resonant satisfaction. And that's what I think artists do professionally is that we examine those bigger issues and try to find what will give us that greater resonant satisfaction or a greater understanding of the meaning of our lives. So anyone who's troubled when they're young or is confused and looks for understanding, I think naturally turns to the arts. And I was troubled and confused and naturally turned to the arts when I was young and began writing at a young age, was recruited as a writer, wrote a great many things, then fell by accident to cinematography, did some very famous music videos and commercials, and then worked my way back towards direction. I directed a lot of theater, and it was a natural way to go. But everything I do ultimately is trying to come to an understanding of the nature of the world, try to understand the human condition. It isn't simple. It isn't simply a narrative that we create. It's a bunch of artificial impositions on a chaotic world, trying to find meaning, and that's what I've been doing for a long time.
Yeah, I think when I listen to the way you talk, it's God's plan really. And you know that we struggle through life and tests us to overcome our fears, to get out of our comfort zone. Even as an actor, as I do this in my life, that's what my adventure has been, the same. And getting on set as much as you can, and networking, which I do naturally. I'm writing my first screenplay. Sizzling Latkes, a romantic comedy, Hanukkah rom-com. I'm working on this baby. It's my first screenplay feature. So I'm taking the challenge in doing that too.
Yeah, it is about trying to find some sense to it all. And you talk about God's plan. I hope that God has a plan for us. I hope there's some plan. My experience of the world is it's pretty chaotic, and we prefer order to chaos because in order there's the reward for virtue, the uh, punishment for malfeasance. That's a balanced and fair and equitable and judicious world. I don't know if the world is always that way, but we want the world to be that way. So I think a lot of the order that we impose on the world is an artificial one. So it seems logical, and we think that if we work hard, we'll get rewarded. If we have talent, we'll get rewarded. That's not always the case, but still, the process of creating that order I think is essential to come to an understanding of the world and ourselves. So in a way, I think everyone's got an obligation to be some sort of artist. They can be an actor, they can be a writer, they can be a director, they can be a painter. It's just looking at the world and then trying to create an understanding of it. And that exploration, I think, is edifying. I think it makes us grow. I think it makes us evolve, and I think is essential. So every time you act, I'm sure you're altered. As you write, you're altered. As you read and look at other artists' work, you're altered. That alteration, I think, is a sacred journey.
Yeah, I'm dreaming the screenplay. I'm
Yeah, it's a
coming,
good
I'm
thing.
coming, I'm coming in with inventions. Like
Hmm.
my grandfather was an inventor, and I
Hmm.
dreamt up a latke machine, an automated latke machine to go against the hot dog people, right?
Nice. That could be
How
fun.
and how to
Yeah.
make this thing. Yeah, so
Hmm.
I mean, yeah, the creative process is amazing.
Yeah.
And I was going to
And
ask, go ahead.
yeah, but that idea of imagination, of coming up with ideas, we're reimagining the world. And every time we reimagine the world, doesn't mean the world that we reimagine is the way it is, but it makes us look at the world differently. So every time we do like surrealism, people look at surrealism and say, wow, that's very strange. That isn't the way the world is. But that's not the point of surrealism. The point of surrealism is it makes you look at the ordinary world differently, not that you look at the surrealisms as normal. Every time you create something the world is then viewed differently. That's what comedy is. If you're talking about writing a comic script, comedy is looking at the ordinary world and reimagining it as something that is ironic or comic, and therefore you look at the ordinary differently. So every time we create something, we alter our experience and others' experience of the world, and that's why it's so important for us to be constantly creating.
Yeah, exactly. And that brings me to the next question. So, what is your creative process like as a director?
Well, my creative process as a director or as a writer, either with the book or with the creation of the film, is to first free myself of any obligations to create what other people expect or even what I expect. So I think it has to begin with free writing or free thinking. That if there's a book that you've read about screenwriting, forget about it. If you've read a book about directing, forget about that. If you read a self-help book, forget about that. What you have to do is take all the rules that have been presented to you as to the way the world works or the way you should function in that world and simply instead take your mind where your intuition leads. So for me, the creative process begins with my writing. I do free writing. I don't write on a computer. I don't write with an outline. I don't write based on any screenwriting books, all of which are rubbish, all of which should be burnt and forgotten about. What I do instead is I simply talk in the voice of my characters interminably. I just go on and have them have imagined conversations about nothing in particular. But this remarkable process of free writing then allows me to create some pages that I can then read. And from reading those pages, I then discover my character. I write to discover what I think, not to illustrate what I think. Any writer who begins with an outline or with an idea of what they want to write and then fills in the blanks never writes as well as someone who writes first and then discovers their idea or ideas. So that's what I do first. I free write, I discover my characters, I rewrite and rewrite, and then gradually work towards form. I never begin with form. And then once I have those characters and they're believable, it's the other thing about writing this way, your characters come out as complex and consistent. They talk about lots of things besides the narrative and the story. I never focus on story. Story will kill you. Filmmaking is not about story, it's about character. And then once you have characters that are believable, complex, accessible, then you can begin working towards a constructed narrative. As for the directing itself, same process. I never go in with a predisposition towards what I want from my actors. Instead, I facilitate my actors. I protect them. I create a safe working environment. I encourage improvisation and allow them to, again, discover the truth of the character without the presumption we know who the character is at the beginning. And then by collaborating with them in this way, by open to discovery rather than presuming that we know everything already, we then evolve a character that is recognizable to an audience because of their complexity rather than its simplicity. So it's same thing I used to do with cinematography, same thing I do with my production designers. Start with free thinking, create the art, and then discover the ideas rather than the other way around.
That's well noted. Thank you for that.
My
That's
pleasure.
interesting. So on the actor side, how do you establish a collaborative relationship with your cast and crew?
Well, first, one of the most important things a director does is casting. That's where you begin a lot of the journey that will ultimately determine your film. And it's not easy casting. You're looking for a variety of things. Rarely are you looking for, as I just described, a character that's been pre-realized or pre-understood. You don't want an actor to do a line reading, for example, at an audition, and it's exactly the way you imagined it because that's not the way the process is going to work as you begin to develop this character together. Rather, you want an actor who's got a creative instrument, their body, their voice, their mind, and you want to know what their life experiences are. You don't want to know what they're drawing on. You want to understand their character. You want to understand their love of craft. You want to understand their openness to things like improvisation. And then you say, okay, now I've got a creative instrument. I've got a collaborator that I can work with, and we can discover this character together. So generally, my auditions, such as they are me interviewing actors to find out what sort of person they are, what books they've read recently, what films they've seen, what actors they admire, so I can discover whether there's an instrument there that I can work with for us to arrive at the place that we ultimately have to arrive on our creative journey. So that's first and most important thing I do. Second thing is, of course, just how collaborative are they? life is way too short to work with someone who's difficult. And even though there's some great actors who are very, very difficult, for me, that subverts everything else that's happening on set. And ultimately, that's going to undermine your ability to make a great film. So you want someone who is um, got a personality as such that is open to collaboration with others and will facilitate others. I love actors who are generous and make other actors better. I always say to young actors that their main job is to make the actor they're playing against better, not to show off their own performance. One of the reasons I like to use multiple cameras is I want to see both actors acting at the same time, so both can arrive at the same energy level rather than shooting one side and the other, which is contrived. Same rules with crew. I want people who are visionaries in their own way, that have their own creative imagination, who have their own take on the material, but also are collaborative and reasonable, people who are imaginative. I don't want to be the only creative mind on set. So I want a cinematographer who will push back against me and some of my ideas and have their own ideas. I want a production designer who does the same thing. I want a sound designer who does the same thing. I want as many great creative minds coming to the party as can. I can harness those, but I can't harness minds that don't present with own independent vision and are simply trying to be sycophants and please me. That's never what I want. I want people who are independent of mind and of imagination, and that we can collaborate to make something greater than the sum of our parts.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's how I would approach it too. I mean, so how do you handle conflict on set if there ever comes a time?
Got another book coming out besides GRQ, which is the book that's coming out at the moment. By the way, GRQ can be got on Amazon and Goodreads,
Yeah.
I should mention. But there's another book called Book of 10, which on our podcast, Filmmaker and Fans, Vince Grimes, who's the creative head at Google, and I interview people from the film industry and actors and directors and writers and so on. And we talk a lot about creative process. And then what I did was I distilled all my ideas about creative process into this book of 10 things to know about directing, 10 things to know about writing, 10 things to know about acting, 10 things to know about leadership, 10 things to know about producing. And we put it all into a book, which comes available next week. And as for all these ideas about how we deal with conflict, for example, conflict is an easy thing to deal with. First of all, it's good when you have conflict because it means you've got people who have an integrity of vision, and it may differ from someone else's integrity of vision. If you get along with everybody, that means you have no independent view of the world. It means you're too malleable and you're not really contributing because you're just agreeing. And just to agree as a crew member is not generally what we want from our creative leadership team. However, you do want to make sure that all the things that lead to conflict that aren't to do with different creative visions is eliminated. So things that are ego driven, things that are to do with jealousies, things to do with people feeling inadequate or frightened, people that feel that they're vulnerable or they're being exploited. Those are the things that have to be eliminated. So the first thing you have to do is create a working environment on a set where people feel safe. So that's the most important thing a director will do. So don't raise your voice. Don't be inclined to criticism. Don't use a simple thing like sarcasm. Don't be cruel. Don't show anger. Don't blame others. Take individual responsibility. These are all the basic tenets, 10 tenets of leadership, which is taking individual responsibility. If you don't like someone else's work, speak plainly and honestly, but never personally. The term ad hominem is very important. Ad hominem means an attack that has to do with a person's personhood rather than with their work. It's perfectly reasonable to say to an actor that didn't work. It's not reasonable to say you suck or you failed or what were you possibly thinking or don't be so stupid. Nor should you say that to any other crew member. If you do make this error of making an ad hominem attack to someone, where you're personal rather than professional about their analysis of what they're doing, then you have to make an apology. Apologies sound like a small thing in our lives. One of the most important thing we do in life. Apologies made or apologies not made can either facilitate us or do us damage for the rest of our lives. So to recognize that you're responsible for a conflict, to say to a person, I did this wrong, to then say how you're not going to do it in the future, and then to recognize how it hurt them. Those three parts of an apology are essential to identifying conflict when it comes and eliminating it when it's there. So that's very, very important. A safe working environment where everyone feels facilitated. People should feel non-threatening. They should not be sexually harassed. They should not be ridiculed. I always say to my crew, it's okay to disagree with someone above you. Don't humiliate someone below you because they don't have the facility to answer. So you have to be very aware of that as well. And then when you do make the error of creating a conflict yourself or involved one, have the wherewithal to apologize and recognize that you most importantly have to take responsibility for your own failures, inadequacies, and errors. In that way, you eliminate a lot of the conflict on set and show good leadership. And a big part of directing is just good leadership, facilitating others because you can't do it all yourself.
Well said. I got to see one director, Dallas Jenkins, the creator of The Chosen. He created the best Christmas pageant ever. I watched his style, much of what you alluded to, what a director should be. He was exactly like that, very friendly, shook even the background actors' hands.
Makes a difference.
It
Recognizing that
does. It
people are there,
does.
it makes a big
It
difference. Yeah.
it does. It does. So on the more musical side, what role does music play in your directing process?
You know, people love to say that we're all storytellers. That's the oft used phrase that somehow has entered our culture. I think there's a few courses and some books written about storytelling, and then people start talking about Aristotle, and then there's screenwriting courses, and people say, well, we're all just storytellers, and all you got to do as a filmmaker is tell a story. And that's specious, wrong, misguided, and poorly thought out. Sure, we do utilize story to organize the chaos of the world all the time. Doesn't mean that our organization of the world is in any way correct. It just means that we prefer order to chaos, and whatever order we choose, we'll prefer that to chaos. Consider, for example, all the different religions there are in the world.
Mhm.
Now, a lot of religions. Are they all right? Well, they can't be all right because they're mutually exclusive. So at any one individual time, it means that most of the people in the world have a different religion than you do. So are they all wrong and you're right? And yet, if you ask most idolaters what they believe, they're sure that they're right. I would say that whichever religion is right, it goes more to the impulse towards religiosity, which is everybody wants an ordering of the world. And they learn that ordering from their community or from their parents or from their families. So they may be believers in Islam, they may be believers in Judaism, they may be believers in Christianity, they may be believers in Shintoism, they may be believers in any other religion. They can't all be correct, but we have this desire for order. If we take that same desire and order and we apply it to narrative and storytelling, then everybody wants to believe that everything's about storytelling because we all understand narrative. And we all create a story and say, here's our story. There's evil and there's good, and good will triumph. If we're virtuous, we will triumph. And that's a narrative. It may be true, it may not be, but we love that ordering. I think significantly, we have to recognize that in film and in all arts, something else is at work besides the ordering of narrative. It's the visceral and the emotional, that we can affect each other with a single word or with a brushstroke on a painting or with a single stanza or a piece of music. And that affects us emotionally and viscerally without a narrative. Without a narrative. Paul McCartney was talking the other day and he was talking about how he doesn't understand how music works. He knows that if you put music in a particular way, and be it a minor key, for example, you can create an emotional response in an audience, but there's no story there that's creating that emotional response. And yet, music creates an emotional response. To understand music is to understand a lot about art, in that, yes, narrative affects us. Yes, we can use narrative in storytelling, but we should also recognize that in music and in painting and in composition and in lighting, we can create an emotive response in an audience without a narrative. And that's what music does. So when I want to create an emotive response in my audience, I will sometimes use music to trigger those emotional parts that I want to trigger separate from narrative. And that's why music is so essential, not only in a film, but at a higher level for us to understand how art works.
That's how I see music too. I mean, certain music emotionally, when you're watching a film, you're captivated, depending how it comes in, depending how you take it, of course, how strong you want the scene to be to back up the acting and the dramatic moment in the scene of tension, you know.
Yes. But at the same time, you have to exercise great caution because if you have what we call wall-to-wall music, which is music running all the time, then you become manipulative. And this is a complex thing for a director or for a writer or for a filmmaker, is finding that balance between emotionally engaging an audience while allowing that audience agency to make their own judgment, and then being wholly manipulative and force them to think of exactly what you want to think at any individual moment. That's a greater contrivance. The relationship we have with film is that it's a representation of the real world, while it's not the real world. It's a two-dimensional representation. It's completely contrived. But to make it seem less contrived, we have to recognize the physical qualities of the world. So sometimes we don't want music because we want it to seem more like the real world. Sometimes we don't want the actors to be too practiced. We love when actors stumble or repeat themselves or show some improvisation because we recognize that speech pattern as closer to the ordinary world and less to the contrived world of cinema. It's why Bob Dylan, with all his raspiness, well, people always done, Bob Dylan's not great. His voice isn't good. Bob Dylan's voice is perfect because you believe that what he's singing, he means. Whereas a voice that's Celine Dion, for example, has got a perfect voice, can sound contrived because it's so perfect that you don't feel the emotional connection you do with someone who's singing from the heart as opposed from a very practiced and very skillful voice. So it is with actors. You sometimes want them to be less perfect. So it is with direction and camera movement. Sometimes a moving, bouncing camera with an uneven frame seems more genuine, and that genuineness is what we go to the truth of a scene and for a moment. So that's why we don't want anything to be too perfect. That's why if we use too much music, it becomes contrived and not like our ordinary, real physical world.
Right. Well said. And who were your mentors in your life who kind of guided you on your path?
I've had lots of people who've been very generous, with me. I put a slightly different view on it. I've got too many mentors to mention because every experience I've had, I've extracted something from. I was a cinematographer on Monster. Monster won an Oscar. Patty Jenkins was the director, much younger than me, just out of film school, more or less a couple of years. But I still learned a lot from Patty about the integrity of vision, about sticking to her guns, about dealing with actors, about having a vision and running it through as a through line through everything they did. But then I worked with great director Jon Favreau, who went on to direct Marvel movies and things. The way he ran a set, the sense of safety and mutual facilitation, I learned a great deal. From that, the Wayans, who I did, White Chicks with in other films, the sense that of love and comedy, and that this should be an enjoyable experience. That making art doesn't have to be a painful one. I learned from that. Great British directors who, like Mike Leigh, who I learned about the nature of improvisation, how that has a greater integrity, and how it's not about storytelling so much as about character. There isn't a person that I've read, viewed, experienced directly, or worked with that I haven't learned something from. But this idea of the Buddhist beginner's mind that you have to be open to learn all the time is essential. I mean, Martin Scorsese, who's been doing this for a very long time, said the other day that he's still learning, and so am I. And that's why everyone I work with, from a PA on a set for the first time who's got a good, cool idea. I interviewed a filmmaker who just did a short today on my Filmmakers and Fan Art podcast. And he's done 3 shorts, and he's 26 years old. So I've been around for a lot longer. And yet he had such great wisdom and understanding that at the end of the podcast, I had learned quite a bit from him. So to be open to learn from everybody, to recognize that our predispositions, our orthodoxies, the ideas we already have are the things that we should constantly be rejecting, constantly trying to find new ideas, new ways of doing things, to constantly remain young by swapping your ideas for new ideas. That's the process so that everybody you meet becomes your mentor in one form or another.
That's amazing. Yeah, I've had my own mentors. My dear friend Michael Strickland, an actor in Winnipeg. We're shooting. He's in a new movie coming out. We're shooting 1963 here with John Travolta about the
Uh,
JFK assassination. That's going on right now. Did not want to cut my hair for background, so I remained, like this,
right.
and until I can get a role that suits me. To grow
Makes
my
sense.
hair to grow hair out for 5 years. I just couldn't believe, to cut it. Because when I spoke to a casting director, Jim Heber in Winnipeg, he says, Matthew, don't cut your hair. There's roles for you. That was his
Yeah.
thing. And then,
Absolutely. And by the way, there were people with my parents used to call them violin players, but there were people with long hair in the 60s. I was there, so don't let them make you
oh,
believe
they
that.
they said the 19, yeah, they said Dallas in that time. I guess they weren't it was a very they said every guy has to have a crew cut.
Well,
And it,
Dallas was slightly different because that was the deep South, but
yeah.
certainly in New York and places like that, or in Europe, people would have longer hair. So
Oh, for sure.
you were there with a visiting orchestra from Romania. That's why you had long hair. So
Yeah.
I will look for you in the background. So we see the one guy with long hair doesn't have the crew cut. We'll know it's you.
Right. Yeah. My friend's doing it. I wait to Manny Batikton's here too. I look forward to meeting him if I can bounce into him in Winnipeg because I love The Princess Bride. And
He's a great actor, and long stage career. Very special actor. The trick when you're meeting famous people like Mandy is that to not talk about the project they're most famous for because you don't want the fandom of loving the film more than the actor. So I would think that we speak to him about his estimable stage career and all the remarkable things he's done, his skill set. People are always more responsive to that because people love generously talking about their craft rather than a film that you love because actors, as people got to remember, as you know, are not the role. The actors are the person creating the role. So they're always more interested in talking about their process than they are about their famous role. So if I was to meet him tomorrow, if you were to meet him and say, I would love Princess Bride, I would say instead, I love how many and varied your roles are and how you alter them from film to film. And I think then get into a really valuable conversation because he's such a skilled and gifted actor.
if I get the chance, because
Mm.
yeah, it you don't know where you meet them. They're hidden away somewhere. They're on set. It's a 3 month shoot. And
There's lots of them here. You get to a stage in your career, you'll be meeting them all the time. And
oh yes.
the great thing about actors is they are each one has a different skill set and a different ability, and it's just a joy to be around them. I've spent 50 years around actors, and I'm richer for it. So that's the great thing about what's happening in Winnipeg right now is that there's so many more films that are coming up there. It gives you so many more opportunities to meet actors with great skill sets and uh, compare your craft one with the other.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure.
You are a truly a mensch. I can say that from my heart to yours. And I don't know a lot of people from Los Angeles, right? And I don't know a lot of the directors, but you're a very nice man, and you
Thank
have
you.
a true soul in how you speak. And I really appreciated talking to you today and to
Well,
get, into
you'll
your head. And
well, I'll be coming up to Winnipeg. I think the one man show is happening. Annalie's very heavily involved in it, so you will hear all about it. And I want you there and watching him backstage with me and all the rest of it because happy to let you. I'm not so presumptuous to call myself a mentor, but happy to mentor you through this process, and you could see the film being made and all the rest of it. And I think it would be a great experience for you.
oh, awesome. No, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And to see you in August.
But
Well,
you will have to cut your hair though. So that's the thing.
oh,
I need a crew cut.
okay.
I'm joking. Keep it long. I'm trying to grow mine out right now. So,
Are you? Yeah.
yeah, all right, brother. Great
That's
speaking to you,
awesome.
Matthew.
Great.
All
Thank
right.
you for your time today.
And send Neil my love, all right?
I will.
All right, brother.
Thank
See
you.
you.